When I was 19 I entered the Singapore military to serve a compulsory 2 years. Went through basic training, everything was fine. Found out I was selected to be a signaller after that. So I went to signal school for 2 months, which is in another army camp across the country. The building we trainees stayed in was a few decades old, but not too bad. It looked clean enough, there were all the bare facilities you'd expect dorms for sleeping in, toilets for showering and stuff, and a small corner on the ground floor for people to smoke. The first few weeks were uneventful. We slept in single beds, 6 in a row, facing each other. But from the 3rd week on, things began to happen. Small things. But it was hard to ignore them. I slept in a bed which was in the middle of the bunk, and I faced the open windows. Our bunk was on the 4th floor, and there was a tree outside, so it never got too bright. So, for some nights, I would lie down go to sleep, but just before drifting to sleep, my bed would shudder. It was a jolt, just enough to wake me up, but there was nothing when I woke up fully. Or, there would be a random noise, a fractured sound to wake me up. Imagine someone saying something unintelligible to you out of the blue. I just brushed it off as me being too tired, but as it continued to happen every other day it was hard to ignore. It also meant I slept poorly. I would later find out I wasn't the only one. But everyone had their own experiences, people just didn't want to share such things at first. I'll list some of the more major happenings in following posts. Letter limit is 2000, so I have to break this up into chunks. Pick is what an army bunk looks like. The layout is slightly different but you get the idea. Happening number 1. I woke up in the dark. I looked at my watch, it was 1 a.m. I was about to go back to sleep, but I heard 2 people talking. Thinking it were my fellow bunkmates, I sat up to have a better look. There was some faint moonlight coming in from outside, so I could make out shapes. The more I tried to make sense of it, the more I realized it wasn't natural. Everyone that I saw were clearly asleep in their beds. The muttering of 2 voices went on. The more I tried to listen to what they were saying, the more I could not understand them. They were not speaking in English or Chinese or any other language that I knew. It was a bunch of rapid gibbering noises. But there were clearly 2 voices. Terrified, I slipped back down into my bed. Happening number 2. This was another night. I woke up again, but this time it was about 11:30 p.m. The room was quiet, everyone was sleeping. Suddenly I heard the sound of shuffling, the sound of flip-flops on bare concrete floor. It clearly originated in the room, but nobody was walking. The sound traveled from one end of the room to the other. It was exactly as if someone was pacing the room, but I couldn't see him. When it reached the end of the room there would be a short pause. Then it'll start coming back again in the other direction. Determined to know it wasn't just me, I rolled down to the side and reached across to tug my friend who was sleeping on his bed. He was annoyed and surprised to be woken up, naturally. But I whispered to him, "Do you hear that?" He didn't understand what I was asking at first. But by the very faint light I saw his eyes widen in the dark. He could hear it too.
Who is that?
I don't know. There's nobody. After a while he shook his head and put his finger to his lips, beckoning me to be quiet. He turned around and wrapped his blanket over him. It was clear he didn't want to think too much about it. All this while, the bed shaking and other small miscellaneous occurrences continued every other day. The timing of them increased gradually over the weeks, slowly ratcheting up in intensity. One time there was a loud sound that took everyone by surprise. We were chatting and laughing normally and suddenly it came and shut everyone up. it was the sound of the metal window pane slamming shut. But nothing moved, the windows were fine. Another time the door to our dorm rattled loudly as though someone was trying to open it from the other side. Thinking it was our sergeants playing a prank on us, we opened the door. But looking down into the long corridor, we were only greeted by a tunnel of inky darkness. Lights were off after 22:30. There would also be loud stomping sounds coming from above, even though the floor above us was uninhabited, locked off and empty at that time. There started to be gossip, of course. Bringing up the issue to our superiors were either met with denial or deflection, but it was clear from their eyes we weren't the first batch of trainees to experience this. And I wasn't the only one affected in my bunk, a few guys had it worse. People started moving out to sleep in spare beds in other rooms or even with other trainee batches, even though it wasn't allowed. I continued to stay, thinking I could just live with it, if only for a few weeks more until I graduate. Happening number 3, Major. I woke up again. I wanted to reach out to check the time, but I couldn't move. I was sleeping on my side, and there was an empty space on my bed. I realized I had sleep paralysis, so I didn't panic just yet. I couldn't move, but I could see the room just fine. I could see everyone sleeping, which windows were open. The leaves of the tree moving. I told myself I would just breathe normally and maybe I could wake up naturally. Then from the corner of my eyes, I saw something. Something that shouldn't be there. Something moved in the far corner. I tried squinting at it. Something tall, very skinny, and black. It looked exactly like a stick figure a kid would draw. It would be almost comical if it weren't so terrifying. And if you don't believe me, I would understand. It moved across the room, striding slowly in a broken and stiff way, like a bad animation that was missing some keyframes. It walked/limped across the room, as my terror built up and I tried to comprehend what exactly I was looking at. I wanted to say something, to do something, but I couldn't. Reaching my bed, it turned around to look at me. The face was round and featureless, save 2 dots for eyes and a long wide mouth that pulled up into a smile. It sat down on the empty space on my bed, and reached out with one of its arms. It had many fingers, I couldn't count them. Dried, writhly fingers. It reached out and touched the soleace of my bare feet. I could feel each finger, the dryness scraping against my soleace, like worms digging for earth. With a massive effort I broke out and screamed. And screamed even more. People sat up and someone ran to turn on the lights. There was nothing there. I was sweating and swearing I saw shit. I could still feel the physical sensation of it, like an echo that contorts onto itself. I moved out to another bunk the next day. I've had enough, my mental health was suffering. Out of the 12 original occupants, I was the 5th guy to do so. There was only 3 weeks left in our training, but I didn't want to sleep there anymore. This incident legit turned me from a half skeptic into this shit is too much for me, man, I'm outta here. It can't be rationalist, I just don't want to be around anything like that ever again. It's very mentally taxing to have physical training in the day and can't even get a good night's rest later on. I started to doubt my judgment of reality. It's totally not fun at all when you really encounter such things IRL.